The Superman movie situation is wild. Of course, we've had many versions of Superman being told, and this is James Gunn's version of Superman, which is pretty much everywhere. You almost can't escape the name James Gunn, but that's not what this video is focused on. No, we're focused on what was supposed to be a massive box office success here domestically and around the globe, and despite some changes that are very unpopular with Americans, this particular film was still expected to succeed. And yet, at this point, it's looking less and less likely that this box office will get anywhere close to the billion-dollar dream. What am I talking about? Well, several stories coming together to give us an outlook that's not so rosy. Here we go. Now, before we get started, just a quick reminder to double check you're still subscribed to the channel. I'm getting people forcefully unsubscribe from my channel regularly, so in order to prevent that, double check now. Please watch at least one or two videos successively, and you should be okay if you have all your notifications turned on. And with that, let's jump into our first article because we have many and they're all linked together. Let's start first with my friend Marvin Montanaro over there on That Park Place, talking about how Reddit mods condemn SnyderVerse Superman Sabotage campaign. I didn't even know this was a thing until this article came together today on the 19th. Now, that is called for giving everybody spoilers in spam form, just constantly hitting everybody with it, and review bombing the film itself. I really don't understand what possesses people to do things like this. Just give an honest opinion about what you saw, and be quiet if you haven't seen it, or at least if you don't have some kind of understanding about what it's going to be or is. There are going to be plenty of people out there in the world giving the opinions. You don't need to add to them with a bunch of nonsense. But beyond that, Superman's not even where the DC universe is kind of stuttering right now. They knew they were going to have a problem with the audience when it came to the film Supergirl. So much awareness on this, as a matter of fact, that Raven Redgrave over there on That Park Place also wrote that Supergirl movie is having their title streamlined by DC Studios ahead of its 2026 release. Well, that makes sense considering they really had what they hoped was going to be a successful girl power film with this one. A girl boss that was literally given those powers decades ago and has lived on in various forms in kind of a positive way. So instead of the hyper-feminist version of the title, Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, the film will now be released simply as Supergirl, which probably, to its benefit, will be easier for the entire fan base to swallow. Because I have to tell you, most people are pretty fed up with and sick of girl bosses. And the previous title just was an indication of the bestest girl boss ever. Not great. But despite creating their own hazards and having others created by the Snyder Bros, we also have the initial projection for the box office, which just doesn't seem quite right. In fact, if you take a look here, Superman was originally projected between 140 and 185 on its opening weekend. This goes back a week on Box Office Theory and gives you an idea of where things stood at that time. But then reality came calling, and our friends over at comicbookmovie.com dropped some real information. That's right, Superman box office tracking reveals first DCU movie could open with as little as $90 million. And while that seems a pretty low number, it's going to be a pretty high number compared to some other superhero films that you'll be seeing now in the future, and some of the recent ones from your friends over at Marvel. But let's go to a mainstream media source and find out what this range might actually be. When you look at the article coming from Anthony D'Alessandro, Anthony, over there at Deadline, Superman hits tracking with 90 million to 125 million US, the domestic open. Those are some very low numbers. In fact, even that 125 million would probably find itself to be embarrassing when some animated or live action remakes seem to be eclipsing those kinds of numbers regularly. According to Anthony's article, Superman, the first movie under the new DC Studios headed by James Gunn and Peter Safran, arrived on tracking with 125 to 145 outlook on NRG. However, various distribution sources believe the real range for the Gunn-directed movie is more like 90 to 125. And you know what? That's where I'm at as well. I don't see this movie opening up to the numbers that we're seeing. I see some of my friends saying that no, it's going to be the higher numbers here. But I don't understand why. This is not the Superman you grew up with, nor a hopeful or callback to the original Superman tales of old. As a matter of fact, this is a very modern audience-friendly Superman, and I think as word of mouth comes out about this film, unless it's 100% opposite of the trailers, there's some real problems here. And in his article, Anthony points out that, unfortunately, a lot of people are listening to things like Parrot Analytics, which we've shown time and time again over the course of the last 4 or 5 years is complete baloney sausage. You see, Superman supposedly pops on unaided awareness. And that's a category where their moviegoers polled automatically cite the movie that they want to see without being prodded by a pulser. In other words, it's a generic question that's asked of these film pollers, and just to see what the primary or the secondary or even the tertiary response would be. With a 30 in unaided awareness, it's higher than Top Gun Maverick, which opened to 126.7 million. But is that the right comp? And I don't think so, because nobody really knows what this film will show. And if you adjust for inflation, that Maverick comp is a little bit higher than is being reported here. It seems, when given a choice, the first choice, Superman is below a lot of post-COVID offerings, superhero films such as Thor: Love and Thunder, which opened to 144.1, The Batman, which opened to 134 for some unknown reason as far as I'm concerned, and Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which opened to 118.4 million. And all of those numbers are more likely to be higher with a adjustment in inflation, and I know you can't believe that inflation went up that much in just a few years, but it has. But here's the rub. First choice for Captain America: Brave New World is higher than Superman's by 71% at the same point in time. In other words, at the point from whence the film is coming out, 71% of the audience was more interested in seeing a failed film in Captain America, or Captain Anti-America, Brave New Soiled Pants. That movie opened to a dismal 88.8 million, meaning that while superhero fatigue is certainly a real thing, and fake superhero fatigue is really something to worry about. In addition, Superman's first choice is 64% behind the Matt Reeves' The Batman. So all of those previous numbers that our friend Anthony introduced you to are completely irrelevant, and he knew them and still put them in the article. Then Anthony goes on to remind you that the outlet Deadline misinformed you about just how important Superman is because it had the best audience ticket seller year to date in its first 24 hours. The Pix, Amazon Prime Early Access paid screenings flying off Fandango's portal, which doesn't mean that much. They're limited in location and in scale, and to one presentation alone. Those screenings are on Wednesday, July 8th, 3 days before the Pix real release on July 11. Now, Superman's pre-sales outstripped the Disney Marvel Studios' Fantastic Four: Final Steps, which is the death of the MCU. But sources say that when it comes to Superman's opening weekend outlook, it boils down to reviews. That's what I said at the very beginning of this video. This is going to be driven by word of mouth. That means you, or people like me in the new media, or anybody who gets out there publicly and talks about this film either in a positive or negative manner. I'm looking at negative manner because some of the things I've been hearing are a little disconcerting, to say the least. But let's get back to something that is very important and barely talked about. Giant ads and print campaigns that can make or break a film. If you think back to Barbie's release from Warner Brothers, it benefited from an over-the-top and viral campaign for the film. It also partnered up with another successful film in Oppenheimer. Additionally, it understood who its audience was and actually catered to them, bringing up the winning formula of a win. Superman doesn't look like it's catering to the primary demographic and fan base that they should be, and I haven't seen much outside of the beginning of this promotion cycle that started off around Christmas time. There's been hints there, teasers here, random clips there, and to be fair, none of them have sold me on the film. In fact, they've shown me a bunch of inconsistent visuals and a fisheye look that I don't think anybody liked. Interestingly enough, the Man of Steel has actually had 7 or 8 films if you count Justice League, and they minted about $2.56 billion at the global box office. Batman v Superman opened up to an impressive $166 million, and if this thing comes into 90 to 125, that'll be a sign of the beginning of the end, if not a further descent into madness by the time we get to Supergirl and anything that follows. In fact, if this film doesn't beat Man of Steel's original opening of $116.6 million, you might as well write the DC Studios experience completely off as a failure. And if I were Warner Brothers Discovery, or whatever they're called at that time, I'd be looking for the exit door on this version of DC Studios. But as I have said all along, I want to think positively about this film as I go in to review it. I'm going to leave any thoughts that I have on the threshold of the door as I enter the theater complex, and when I walk out, I'll give you my honest thoughts. Speaking of honest thoughts, it's time for yours. That's right, audience participation time. I'm done here. Let me know what you think. Do you think these numbers, these early numbers and forecasts of what the box office coming in will be for this film are accurate? Do you think we should be considering that $140, $150 million range, or do you think it's going to be higher domestically? Do you think this thing is going to make $515 million domestic as was originally forecasted in its entire run? Or do you think it's more likely that we will see another film fall well short of the $1 billion winner? Let me know those thoughts and any others that you have down in the comments section below. As always, be sure to take care of yourself, take care of others, and until next time, see ya! Maybe after the Superman movie.